Here we are in the square at Eynsham, and this is the beginning of our film of the farmhouses of the old village. And you can see in front of you the Bartholomew Room. We're in the square. Now, in fact, I've got with me Steve Parender, who's the expert on these things, and will tell me when the Bartholomew Room was put up. About
1703.
It's about 1703. But of course, the square was about 4 times this size. All the Bartholomew Room wasn't there. All the houses beyond with the cart, they weren't there. And then if we pan round here, all these houses and Lyle's Cafe, that wasn't there. So the square was pretty big. And the market was held here from 1140, wasn't it, Steve? And to start with, it was on Sundays. And then in the 14th century, they started having it on Mondays instead. And if we pan right round, we find Llandaff House, which is the first of the farmhouses, where one of the families lived. I can't remember which family was it. The Arnott family lived there.
In the 19th century.
In the 19th century. And the house itself was built, we reckon, around...
Early 18th century.
And then...
1732.
1732, and then developed a bit since then with various bits and pieces.
The battlemented bay windows and the circular window
right.
Are 20th century.
Yeah. 20th century additions. Yeah. Now, if we turn back like this and look in this way, there's the Bartholomew Room where the museum is, and straight on beyond is the crossroads, which we're going to go to next. So now here we are at the crossroads, often called Harris's Corner, because I think there was a shop on Harris's, wasn't it? And as we move up north, up Mill Street, we can see in the distance where we're going to go next. And it's called Mill Street because it went on and on. It went beyond the A40 because the A40 wasn't there, straight on until eventually it got to Eynsham Mill. But that's quite a long way away, but that's why it's called Mill Street. Now we're going to proceed north up Mill Street to the next of the farmhouses. So there we are looking down at the crossroads. We come up Mill Street and on we come, and eventually we come to this house that's set back behind these big yew trees. Yew? No, perhaps they're not, but some kind of bush. So you can't see it very well. So Steve has very kindly given us a wonderful picture of what it's like. There it is, Home Farmhouse. And Steve will tell us about it. When was it built?
It was dates back to the 17th century.
Yeah.
It's actually got some interesting panelling on the inside.
Oh yeah, wood panelling.
Which probably came from the abbey. The panelling itself is 15th century. It's what they call linen fold panelling. It's
excellent.
Very high status stuff.
Yeah.
Really, there's only one place in the village that it could have come from, and that's Eynsham Abbey's, the Abbot's house.
The Abbot's house.
Yeah.
And now, if we look up to the right here, we can see a thatched cottage just before the post office, and that is the only bit of Middle Farm that's left. Middle Farm itself is where the post office is now. And Steve's got another picture, this time, of what the farm looked like. There it is. Oh, that's the thatched cottage and what it looked like, yes. Righty-ho. A little further up, you can see the library there. And we're standing outside the post office. And we move north, and here's the market garden. And beyond it, Wintle's Farm. And of course, the market garden was part of the outhouses of Wintle's Farm. Do we know a date of Wintle's Farm?
It's early 18th century.
Righty-ho, there it is. And I didn't realise until very recently that when you go into the market garden, you're going into the outhouses of Wintle's Farm, but you are. So here again is Wintle's Farm. And now if we turn across Queen Street and we come to Redthorn House. Redthorn House was part of the Swan Farms complex, and the main farmhouse was up where the Chinese takeaway is now. And behind Redthorn House, going down Queen Street, were lots of the barns and outhouses. Most of all were burnt down in a big fire. And Redthorn House itself was built what date?
It's, again, early 18th century.
Early 18th century. But it wasn't really ever a farmhouse, it was more a residence. Miss Swan lived here for most of the first half of the 20th century, running a school. And at least one person in the village actually went to school in this house. Now, up above the front door between two windows, you can see a funny little mark, and that is an 18th century fire insurance mark. And Steve has a picture of it for us. There it is. And that's what you can see, but it's much better in the picture. Now we've come east from the crossroads, I mean west from the crossroads, and we come to the oldest brick building in the village. And then beyond it, here, is Blankston's farm. Date, Steve, do we know?
Dates back to at least 1802, but probably before that.
Okay.
Date 1802.
Oh yeah, we're going to come round a minute and down there, it carries on, lots and lots of bit of it. And we're going to go in that entrance there. So here is the far end of Blankston's farm. We come to the entrance here. And there are a number of buildings here which were part of the farm. Here on the right is a barn with outhouses, of course, now lived in. And then if we move on in a little way, we can see behind the farmhouse a house with green windows. Well, green windows. And that was another barn. And so it's quite a big complex here, Blankston Farm. Now we've come east from the village centre to Queen Street, and here is Lord's Farm, called Lord's Farm because of the Lord's family. And beyond it is that barn. And if I'm not right, Steve, that barn is the only threshing barn?
It's the only threshing barn left
in the village, yeah. And we're then going to walk on up Queen Street to see one more thing. Now we've come down the Bitterel from Queen Street to see Hall Barn. And some people can even remember Hall Barn when it was a burnt out shell. And now, of course, it's a residence, but it was part of Florey's farm. The Florey's family had the farm last of all before it stopped being a farm. And I think the farm itself was owned by Corpus Christi College.
Yeah, we're on the road.
So now we've come south from the crossroads to what we reckon is the oldest farm in the village. It was often described as Abbey Stones. We reckon it was built in the 16th century, don't we, Steve?
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's called Old Farm. And next to it is the Old Granary. And lots of the buildings behind it were all part of this farm. The southern end of the granary is a little plaque, which you can't see, so Steve has got a picture of it. There it is, 1561, proving the date, which we'd already given to you. Now we've come to the southern end of Abbey Street, and here is Abbey Farmhouse. Of course, named because it was right by the Abbey, probably almost certainly owned by the Abbey. And it's 19th century. But if we look over here, we can see also lots of buildings which are all part of the farm, which we'll look at in more detail once we get over this hedge. So here is the lovely old barn of the Abbey farm, with all sorts of fascinating things like the holes for the doves, so there aren't any doves anymore. And then further down here, all these old buildings. I think you said there was a pigsty down there once upon a time. Down the end. And then if we come across to the other side, down the far end there was the cowshed.
Yep.
And then here we've got, we think, were stables of some kind. And so it was really the biggest farm, most important farm in the village. And then if we turn around and look this way towards the trees, we can see exactly where the abbey was, as high as those trees. And Steve's got a picture of Southall Minster, which we reckon the abbey was very much like. But the story of the abbey is another story. You can find details of all these farms and lots of other interesting things about the old buildings in the village in this book written by Steve.